For our third and final installment on implementation, I want to talk a little bit about the chapter I asked you to read in the Majone Wildavsky's second edition. In that book, he adds a chapter by a subsequent student whose name is Majone, and Majone and Wildavsky are known for going through a very good summary of the top-down and bottom-up models. So be sure to take that in as you're reading that first part of the chapter. And then in the discussion of bottom-up implementation, they present the idea that the implementer is trying to achieve the outcomes of the legislation, and that the legislature cannot possibly identify everything that would come up in the implementation process. It's just not possible that you can pre-engineer every dimension of the bill. Therefore, they believe that the bottom-up model has to be at least considered to some extent. Even though there are many things that are prescribed in the bill, there are other things that are quite wide open. And then you have these situations where you have local politics that are a reality you just can't avoid. So in their description of trying to make this into a 2x2 table, the favorite strategy of political scientists perhaps, they argue that if you look at a top-down model, the legislator who proposes the bill has an assumption of cause and effect behind the bill that they're passing, or often does. And so if in the case of the Oakland project, it was that you felt to really advance the economy in Oakland, you had to address issues of chronic unemployment, and that the only way to really expand the economic development of the Oakland area was to invest in new building and projects. So they ended up getting into a huge port project, and found that ironically the inexpensive car wash was the more effective at developing jobs for chronically unemployed, and doing so quite quickly. However, if you have a causal model in that piece of legislation that's driving the ideas of the legislator, and the specifics in the bill are behind that causal model, what Majone and Wildavsky more or less ask is, what happens if the causal model is wrong? And so maybe it isn't such that you have to build big, huge infrastructure projects to generate more economic development. If that assumption was wrong, a lot of the specifics in the bill are not going to do what the legislators thought it would do. So one of the things Majone and Wildavsky point out is that as the agency is trying to implement this piece of legislation, they are trying to figure out how to make the operating procedures effective. And that if they have some discretion and have a positive disposition toward the program outcomes, that by doing things different than they're mandated in the bill, or going beyond what's mandated in the bill, may be exactly what's necessary to effectively reach the program objectives. So they come up with this 2x2 table. They say there are two dimensions. One is whether the original causal model, or what they call the original legislative decision, was good or bad. Was the causal model behind it actually accurate? And so they said, if it's accurate and you get effective or good execution by the agency, a top-down process of carrying it out, it's perfect. You don't have a problem, a policy problem. If you have a causal model that is inaccurate, but boy, that agency effectively implements it, you end up with a policy problem because the causal model was not accurate. A third cell is where you have a decision that is based on good causal theory, but you have inaccurate execution of it, in which case you have a control problem, and you say, why didn't they just do what they were told? And the fourth cell in this 2x2 table is where you have a bad decision in the legislative bill, in that they didn't have a good causal model, it was erroneous, but you have inaccurate execution of the bill by the executive agency. And what they're doing is they're fixing the causal model problem so that they can have a program that actually achieves the objectives that were set. So sometimes bad implementation or erroneous implementation is actually being done to fix the program so that it achieves the outcomes that were desired.